like to thank McCormick Company for sponsoring this evening's reception. Our moderator this evening is Michael O'Neill, member of the faculty at the University of Arizona in Tucson. He's also the executive director of the Middle Eastern Studies Association. That association is just concluding 4 days of meetings here in Baltimore. And I should emphasize that the meetings here have been hosted by Morgan State University, which also was our reception host for this afternoon's conference for secondary school students. And we are indebted for this panel tonight, which was arranged to Professor Joseph Overton of Morgan State University, who made all the arrangements. And Professor Overton, many of you know from meetings here at the council, over on my left, the far side with the red tie. And we thank him very much for arranging this evening's panel. Our meeting will end at 7:20 this evening instead of 7:10. I'm forewarning you because of the fact that we have a panel. Our format will be that each panelist will speak for 5, no longer than 8 minutes. We've just come from an academic conference which is supposed to train you to observe time limits, but of course that's the worst place to get training in such matters. But nevertheless, Dr. Bonin will limit each panelist to 8 minutes, after which time the floor will be open to questions. I think that's all that needs to be known about our format. Professor Bonin will serve as moderator. He'll recognize questioners from the floor, and he'll introduce our panelists. Professor Bonin.
Thank you. I think it's an unusual opportunity, a unique opportunity to be able to have 4 distinguished guests from the Middle East, 3 of them from the Gulf area and 1 from North Africa, to see their perspectives on the Gulf and how they view U.S.-American relations and the effect on the Gulf and the effect of the Gulf on the relations. Let me just very briefly introduce each of our speakers, and then they will say a few things about themselves before they start their discussion as well. So sort of starting on my left is Dr. Walid Mubarak, the Department of Political Science of the University of Kuwait. And next on my left is Dr. Ahmad Shikara of Al Ain University of the United Arab Emirates. And on my right is Dr. Abdel Hamid Lutfi, Dean of Letters at University of Meknes in Morocco. And then further to my right is Dr. Shamlan Al-Essa of the University of Kuwait, also Department of Political Science. And so we'll begin with Dr. Ahmad Shikara of Al Ain University.
Yes, thank you. I am a lecturer at the university. I teach political science, and my specialization on the Middle Eastern politics and Gulf area. I will give only a few remarks on the Middle Eastern politics, particularly the U.S. role in the area and in the Middle East in general, so that other people will complete my remarks and add more contribution to what I already will say. I think any foreign policy obviously will be based on power and interests, and the U.S. policy is not different from any other great power in the Middle East. However, the U.S. policy in the Gulf is a recent phenomenon. I mean, in the sense that it's assumed a prominent role in the area following the British departure or withdrawal in 1971. The U.S. policy towards the Middle East was based on principles and doctrines, which, as we all know, for example, Truman Doctrine, which was established in 1947, and then the Eisenhower Doctrine, which was established in 1957, and then one would say the two-pillar system, which Nixon introduced in 1969. Following his state visit to Guam Island, and then the Carter Doctrine, which introduced the rapid deployment forces into the area. And then you have the Reagan administration with its conception of military and with its decisiveness in trying to follow up Carter doctrine, in the sense that the U.S. should have an important role in the area, and that role should be mostly decisive and against any communist aggression in the area. My main point is that the main conception of the U.S. policy was centered on confronting communism or containment of communism. Not any other perspective was added to this policy, which is, I think, is a deficient line, and also I think other powers, particularly the Soviet Union, exploit this phenomena to its own advantage. This is one point. The other point, I think there should be a linkage between Middle Eastern politics in the sense Arab-Israeli conflict and what happens in the Middle East, particularly in the Gulf area. And the policy is not based on just interest and power, but also should be based on understanding the feelings and aspirations of people, particularly the Palestinian question, what I mean, and any other people who suffers in the area, particularly, for example, in the sense of the Afghanistan Mujahideen, for example. Policy should be based on a more comprehensive view and should be more clear-cut and should not be a reactive policy and should not be just changing over time. That's one important aspect of any foreign policy which to survive for a long period, I think. The other thing I think one should understand is that there are forces within the Arab world which should be understood, like, for example, the socio-economic forces and the ethnic forces, the different forces which play an important part in balancing the political system within each country. And that needs more studies on each force and each socio-economic structure of each country. This needs more understanding, more real studies, genuine studies of their reactions, their aspirations, their expectations, which is rather, I think, lacking in the administration, though despite all the efforts by many consultants and by many consultant bodies in the U.S. I think I'll stop at there and complete. It's okay? Thank you. I'm open to discussion.
Second speaker.
Okay.
First, Shamlan Laisha, Kuwait University, native from the Gulf. My specialization, third world politics. First, I would like to thank you for inviting us to talk to you today. And I tell you the truth, when they called me, my friend called me and asked me to talk to you by the phone, quite long distance, I was embarrassed to tell him no. So it's too difficult to reject somebody calling from the United States and tell him no. Why I didn't say no, I don't know why, but my reason refusing to talk to you in the beginning, because he asked me to talk about Arab and Muslim attitude toward the U.S. When you think of it, after I closed the phone, I said Arab, I mean Muslim attitude, we have 40 Muslim countries, each one of them have position about the war in the Gulf. And we have 20 Arab countries, they are different, all of them fighting, each one have its own policy toward the war in the Gulf and American present. So what to say? What I have to say? Then what I'm going to say today is not adding much. I hope we'll make something intelligent. I expect you to say questions so we can stir up discussion more than I talk. As you know, American presence in the Gulf is not a new one, not a new phenomenon. It started half a century ago when the Americans get interested in the Gulf through their interest of oil. They were competing against the British to get access to the oil in the Gulf. But I won't go through history of what happened, all this thing, but let's concentrate what the U.S. interests now in the Gulf. There's four objectives of the U.S. interest in the Gulf now. First, determination to maintain freedom of navigation. I think all of you know this point. Second, preserve free world access to the oil resources. That's understandable. Third, to promote security and stability of moderate Arab Gulf state. And the fourth one, the last one, limit the expansion of Soviet presence in the Gulf. I think the Arab regime majority of them have no objection to all those objectives. And many of the public sharing the same attitude. But we in the, what I'm trying to say, the public attitude in the media, as expressed through the media and public speeches, have different point of view and have negative point of view toward American presence in the Gulf. Why they are negative? They have their comprehension and their fear about American presence in the Gulf. We question why. Because America stated they are supporting the moderate Arab regime. At the same time, they didn't take position toward Iran. What their position toward Iran? Are they against Iran? If so, how? I see the dilemma facing the U.S. policy in the Gulf. When they want to maintain very good friendly relations with Iran, revolutionary Iran, because Iran geopolitical location toward next to the Soviet Union and long history of Iranian-American relation, they want to maintain it. That I think they have very right to have it. At the same time, they want to maintain a good friendly relation with the Arab. Now, how the U.S. will behave if there is a clash between the two? I ask you this question, that we have our comprehension, because until now, the U.S. declared that they want to maintain freedom of navigation. We see every day some ship being hit and no reaction. There's some reaction, limited reaction. We understand why. Because the U.S. still want to maintain friendly relation with Iran in spite of Iran's hostile attitude toward the U.S. The reason why, understand, because the U.S. didn't want to lose Iran, because Iran, to the Soviet, Iran is more important to them than any Arab country in this time. And if I'm in Reagan position, I'll hesitate 10 times trying to find out what to do about it. You have Iran close to the Soviet, you don't want to lose it, and you have Arab friendly to the US, you have economics and historic interests with them. How to settle this problem? That one dilemma. The other dilemma, I think, the other dilemma, the one Americans raised the question, why the Americans have to protect the Gulf area when the Gulf state, they want to give access, military access to the forces in the Gulf. We feel in the Gulf, that's right, but at the same time, there is, I think what we have is enough American bases. We have American bases in Saudi Arabia, not a facility, they call it facility. In Saudi Arabia, they have facility in Bahrain, they have facility at the same time in Oman, 3 Gulf states. But you might ask, what about Kuwait? Why the Kuwait still have a very good relation with the Soviet? And they won't give the American air bases or access to or military facility to the American. The Kuwaiti, we're still neutral because we're still skeptical about what the American position will be in the future. Suppose we don't have good relation with the Soviet, and we have this crisis, and we came the American, before the flagging, we want to protect it. They said no, we won't give you protection, it's very costly and very costly. Then when we went to the Soviet, second day the American came running. So you have to maintain friendly relations with the Soviet and the American at the same time. My fear, I raised the question to you, my fear when the price, the cost of maintaining American presence in the Gulf going up every day. Now it costs around $2 million a day. So far the U.S. paying for it. What about when you have economic problem here? Why the U.S. have to pay for it? Why not other Western countries share this burden with the U.S.? That's why I suggest might be a solution to have international forces in the Gulf, where everybody have to put some share the burden, economic burden and military burden. Might be a solution to the Gulf. I stop here so I give you a chance. Thank you.
The third speaker will be Dr. Walid Mubarak, also University of Kuwait.
Well, hello everybody. I am from, I teach at Kuwait University, but I am Lebanese myself, so I mix between two countries that are in trouble, really. The obvious fact about those two countries, or about Lebanon on one side and the Gulf on the other side, is that their problems are very interconnected. I guess the Iraqi war on one side and Israel on the other side have really added to more sectarian tension in the Arab world. There is, it seems, a common goal between those two countries to maybe fracture Arab society and maybe build more countries or more states within those Arab states between Israel and Iran. I do feel that or people ask in the area, is there an American foreign policy in the Middle East? Is it an American foreign policy or an Israeli foreign policy on one side? What about U.S. policy towards Iran? Is there a policy towards, is there a U.S. foreign policy in the Gulf? What about U.S. credibility there? We all know about the Iran-Contra affair, and at the same time, we know that the American fleet is in the area. What do the Americans want in the area? Do they really want to protect Kuwaiti ships, or they want to protect their interests? Is the price going to be the Arab Gulf states? We don't have an answer really yet. If the Americans want to maintain their credibility in the Gulf, then they better maintain it. So far, we haven't seen any of this thing going on. Now, American hesitance in the area has really invited the Soviet Union in. The Soviet Union now, as you may know, have been taking a position on the Security Council Resolution 598, which is closer to Iran. At the same time, he is the major supplier of arms to Iraq. In other words, the Soviet Union has stepped foot in the Gulf. Of course, the Soviets are afraid of increasing or sharply increased US and other European warships in the Gulf. We should not forget that the Soviet Union is not very far from the Gulf. There's only Iran as a buffer state, and that's why maybe Iran is important also for the United States. Of course, it is important because of the importance of oil in the Gulf. So in other words, there are different things that are going on in the area, if it's in the Fertile Crescent or in the Gulf, that are not working really in favor of the US in the long run. Because if the countries are fracturized, that means we are inviting more Soviet influence to the area, because those factions are going to rely on an outside power for weapons, training, etc., etc. And I guess this is one of the problems that we really have to be very careful about. Well, I guess I have raised many questions. It is really a very broad topic, and maybe what I have said could initiate more questions from the floor later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Fourth speaker will be Dr. Abdin Lutfi.
Well, my colleagues are political scientists and I'm not. And therefore I wonder whether I should tell you something about my background or whether I should simply keep quiet about it. Because I studied in an English department in Rabat, Morocco, at the university there, and then back in 1971 I went to the University of Iowa where I studied American literature. Somebody from Iowa, I suppose. And then I did my doctoral work at the University of Pennsylvania in American civilization. And I ended up actually, if I may say so, specializing in religious anthropology, and I spent the last 10 years studying Islam in America. So I wonder whether I can do, whether I should waste your time by giving you my layman's view of the conflict in the Middle East. I'm here to attend the MESA conference and also to take part in the lecture tour that Hassan II, the King of Morocco, has organized this year to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the signing of the Friendship Treaty between Morocco and the United States. And therefore, we were the first country to sign a friendship treaty with the United States and to recognize the existence of this country. And also to, when it is possible, to remind my American audience that Captain Sims came to the Bay of Tangier back in 1863 trying to have the Moroccan government recognize the Confederacy, and that we turned him down. Well, I think I have just given you enough proof that I should just stop here, but that I'm not qualified. But I'll tell you the way we view the problem, or at least the way I think that Moroccans view it. So much has been said about the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union in the Gulf, you know, all the talk about the freedom of navigation, this and that. But not much has been said about the initial responsibility of the Gulf states themselves on the Arab side of the Gulf to defend themselves. Because if we line up the figures, we find that the Gulf states from Iraq to Oman, to the southern tip, add up enough people, enough revenues, enough artillery and weaponry to be able to defend themselves, or at least, you know, in the case of the Gulf Cooperation Council areas, states, then maybe their military forces are not important enough, but they could defend their own territories, and with the help of other Arab states, I suppose they could handle the problem without asking the United States to come in force, and at the same time being afraid of American involvement in the Gulf area. I think one has to be quite clear when one requires a foreign power to intervene. I must say between brackets that it's not always that American power has been called for. I mean, because America considers the oil routes as being part of its strategic network, and that the oil fields of the Middle East are part of its strategic reserves, and so on. And therefore, it's not always true that American forces are called for. Sometimes they just come, and they are there. So what I would say is, this is my personal opinion, but I would tell you the way we in Morocco, what is the position of Morocco. I don't think Morocco has a very clearly defined position on what role America should play in the Gulf area, because we consider that this is a matter that Americans themselves should decide. But our position is that we as a country will defend, will help defend, the Gulf states. And this is what King Hassan II said recently, about 2 weeks ago, to a reporter from Siyasa, a Kuwaiti newspaper. He asked him whether Morocco would support Kuwait, and he said, sure, I supported Kuwait back in 1958 when Iraq was claiming that Kuwait was part of its national territory. and I will continue to do it. And Morocco has played a very positive role on the side of Egypt during the 1967 war, and on the side of Syria. Many Moroccan soldiers died on the Golan Heights. So, and we will continue to do that. The position of Morocco is that Iran is a threat to not only the oil routes, but it is also a threat to the Muslim world and to the Arab world, because since Ayatollah Khomeini came to power back in 1979, Muslims now are always asking questions whether they are Shiite or Sunni, and this has brought, a very important, has imposed a very important strain on the Muslim community. And for us, this is more important than the Gulf War, because it's a long-term problem, and it might, disrupt our attempts to have a firm identity that we've been just trying to build up after years of colonial rule. So for us, this is very important, and we consider that this is a very important threat to the Muslim community, and a threat also to the Arab community, to the Arab world, because if Iran oversweeps, the tiny Gulf states, then nobody knows where Iran is going to stop. The Moroccan government called for a meeting of Sunni and Shi'i theologians recently, in order to try to define at least the points where we branch off, where Sunnism and Shi'ism branch off, because the important thing is not to impose Shia Islam or Sunni Islam, but at least to come at to reach a point of convergence where the coexistence is possible. So these are some of the positions that are taken by Morocco, and my opinion is that I would I would like the United States to be less on the sides of Israel than it is currently, and then maybe that will contribute to the solution of some of the problems in the Middle East. But whether the United States should intervene in the Gulf or not, that's up to you, Americans. Thank you.
Well, I can tell these gentlemen have been through 3 days of panels, because the typical scholarly format and panel, you have to sort of send them little notes and telling them that they have 1 minute left, and then you send them another note and so forth. And I see we have plenty of time left from the original allotted time. No one went beyond their time. That's what I'm trying to say. So we have plenty of time for questions and discussion, so I hope we can sort of enlist questions. And
given a scenario of the United States Congress invoking the War Powers Act, and after the prescribed period of time, the Congress deciding that because of the threat of possible further military involvement, threat to peace, and because in our zeal to reduce deficit, and the cost included, I think, $2 million a day of being in there, that we should withdraw our forces from the Gulf. What do you foresee the scenario then would be?
Can I answer? I think the answer is very easy. Now the Soviet Union offered to take over already we have in Kuwait 3 ships, Soviet ships. The thing with the media and the United States, they're making big thing of the flagging, reflagging every day. While the Soviet, they are there, nobody talk about it, nobody hear about them. They have 3 ships and they offer 8 more to rent them to Kuwaiti, and we held them down because the American offer us. So if the American refuse the Congress, then the Soviets, very sure, I'm sure they will do it. But I don't think the American will give up the Gulf that easy. But the question, what to do with Iran? And in case the Congress decided or took the position that they want to withdraw. They have to decide what their policy toward Iran will be in the future. They don't want to lose Iran. It's very important to the US. Same time, Iran very important to the Soviet. That's why Iran now manipulate both power, both great power manipulated by Iran, playing one against the other to maintain their policy. Now, how we going to solve it, I don't know.
I guess we have to ask ourselves the question, what are the costs and what are the benefits of withdrawing from the Gulf? Already there is a proposal put by two distinguished U.S. congressmen about, forming a UN force in the Gulf. But, a UN without the inclusion of U.S. and Soviet warships there. Now, a decision of this sort has to pass through the Security Council of the UN, which means, the approval of the 5 permanent members. And, to have the approval of the Soviet Union to such proposal, meaning that you are giving the Soviets a say in the Gulf, and something that the Americans don't want and don't like. So it is so there is something going on, between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Kind of competition going on over there. So it's becoming out of the hands of the smaller states of the Gulf now.
Gentlemen, I wonder if the attention that we paid so far to the United States as opposed to the Soviet Union in the Gulf.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
It seems to me that the issue is what the shape of the Islamic world is going to be. The history of Islam in the last 100, 150 years has not been very successful as a force in the world. The Ayatollah claims that he has the answer to this. The Islamic Brotherhood, the Islam, also have similar ideas. I think there's great fear in the United States that sort of a French Revolution followed by an Islamic Bonaparte would be a very bad thing for us and also for everybody in the area. The question is, like, the United States is cannot save Islam from the Ayatollah. It simply can't be done. What are the Arab countries going to do in the light of this, the Arab League summit and sort of the reacceptance of Egypt, to a degree at least, into the Arab world? How determined are they to provide an alternative to this screaming sort of Arab Islamic fundamentalism?
I think, and I agree with you, and for me that is the essential question. It's not so much oil, because oil could be bought either from the Iranians if they overrun the area, or it could be bought from the Arabs. So for us, at least the way I see it, I shouldn't even say we see it, the way I see it is that what future shape is going to take the Islamic world. Now, the revolution in Iran took place in 1979, and it is here to stay. And cognitively speaking, it is as important to world history as the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and the Russian Revolution. And now we have the 4th revolution. And it's really shaped, and it's going to shape, the world, for at least a century to come. This is true not for Shia Islam alone, but it is true for religion on the whole. And Islamic militancy is going to continue to exist whether the Muslims are Shia or Sunni, because there is a restructuring of society going on through the religious forces, and thanks to religious ideology, militancy. So the question then is what shape the Muslim world is going to take in the future. And unless either a compromise is reached with the Shia concerning, you know, the coexistence between the two sides of the faith is reached, unless that is reached, or unless the Iranians are stopped, then the world is in, you know, for big surprises and big changes in the future. And I don't think personally, you know, that the importance of the oil is important. I mean, oil just alone is that important, because oil could be got from whoever has it. And the problem then is to see who is going to stop the Iranians. And that is the question. And I personally am not a political scientist, and I really hate to talk about this rivalry all the time. Now, Iran is supposedly playing up the two powers, one against the other, but so are the other countries, aren't they? So, I am an Arab, but I'd like, you know, just to look at the problems from two different angles, because it's decision makers, you know, have many sources of opinion, and they obviously don't take just one view. And therefore, I think, you know, that the Gulf states and the Arab states themselves, you know, should just begin, you know, to think very seriously about their security. Now, you spoke of the last summit conference that just finished, you know, in Amman recently, and it has often been said that asked whether Egypt would be asked back into the fold of the Arab League. Well, let's be serious and ask whether the Arab world is going to go back into the Arab League with Egypt, because Egypt is a major power, notwithstanding, you know, its political stance on many issues. But it is a great power, and without Egypt, you know, not much can be done. Now, it seems to me that with Egyptian army and technology and soldiers and Gulf money, much can be done without much help, either from the Russians or from the Soviet Union. I think it can be done. Yes.
I want to comment, just a short comment. My Arab friend, Arab, you have to be different from one each other. Twice he said it, the Gulf Arab have to help themselves. I agree, but I think he knows the figure about the Gulf and Arab Gulf, how many the population is.
I have
the
the
whole
list here.
the whole combined population in the Gulf, around 16 million, if I'm not mistaken. The real figure, leave aside Saudi Arabia, they declare they're now 12 million, but the real fact 6 million. The rest of the Gulf, all of them, will come around less than 16 million, all of us. Their army combined won't come less than 500,000, all of them. While Iran, 50 million, and their army over 1.5 million. How can you fight? Leave aside the fact that even if we got the military aspect, all of it, I exclude Iraq because already in war against Iran, we don't want them to get involved with the Gulf. And in military, even the military aspect, true, we have more arms than Iran in the Gulf, but how we want expect Bedouin to manage arms, sophisticated arms? I mean, never been experienced.
They're doing it.
Huh?
They're doing it.
Where?
Now, the Iraqi Air Force is one of the most sophisticated air forces in the area. It's second probably only to the Israeli Air Force. So they are doing a great job.
If you're doing a good job, you're not.
Oh, okay. One more response to this question, then we'll have the next one.
It is really easy to say that, you know, Arab states have to manage problems by themselves. But if there are ghosts sitting with them all the time, how can they manage themselves? You know, in Lebanon, for example, our leaders, or militia leaders, if you want to put it in this way, They get together sometimes to work out a peace settlement for Lebanon. And we always say that there are always... And what we say in politics, I'm a political scientist, that, you know, that the Middle East is a subordinate system to the international system. In other words, the interactions are always there between this subordinate system and the international system, which is basically dominated by the US and the Soviet Union. Can we really do things independently from the Soviet Union or the US? This is a very difficult question, I mean, and we just can't do it. Maybe we can do certain things, but there are things, especially those that have to do with survival and interests that go beyond our borders, you know. We always expect those bigger powers to intervene. And this is the history of the Middle East.
Where is Shah perspective now, and do the Arab states has any political future in Iran?
Where is Shah? Son?
His son?
Reza.
Yeah. The question is where is Shah Reza? In other words, the son of the
Maybe
previous
it's in
Shah.
Massachusetts.
And what was the rest of the question?
Do the Arab states feel he has any political future in Iran?
Do the Arab states feel that he has any future in Iran?
Well, as to where he is, I don't think, maybe you know better than we do. I think maybe he's in the US sometimes, he's in France sometimes. His followers are, I think, in any standard, are not great followers, you know, not a big percentage of the Iranian population. And the Shah, I mean, his statements also are not credible. Other leaders of the opposition did not really took him into a really serious contender for power in Iran. Other groupings in Iran, inside Iran, working against the government are the people who are in opposition, in real opposition. But as far as I know, not many people, even people who were in opposition against the Khomeini rule and were outside the country, they don't give credit to the son of Shah Iran. If he is to have a role in Iran, I think it will be very symbolic role, as the role prescribed by the Shah at the end of his rule, not more, not less than this. Unless he has great followers in Iran or great support, I don't think he will have any chance of returning to Iran, as far as my knowledge is concerned. Thank you.
Now, I wanted to address this question to Dr.
Abdul Hamid. Abdul Hamid.
From Morocco.
That's right.
I wanted to know why you brought up the question of Egypt. And of course, everyone knows that Egypt in 1979 signed Camp David Treaty, peace treaty with the state of Israel. And you seem to indicate your opposition to that. You also seem to indicate when you said that you would like to see the United States less on the side of Israel, that's your quote, that it seems to me you differ from King Hassan of Morocco, who has had several meetings in the past, this year and last year, with Shimon Peres, former Prime Minister of Israel, and he seems to have very cordial relations, and seems to support the Camp David agreement. Why do you differ from your King Hassan of Morocco?
I think, to begin with, that's my right. But really, I didn't say anything about Camp David. You might have inferred something. No, I said that Camp David in Egypt has now been recognized. I mean, has just re-established political diplomatic relations with about 6 countries. And I'm sure that Morocco, I don't know, I haven't read the papers recently, that Morocco is going to be one of them. And I have great respect for Egypt, and I really just didn't allow myself to judge Egypt. Now, the other quote is true. I think, that American policy is heavily tilted towards Israel, just in terms of budget, in terms of influence, of the Jewish community or the Jewish lobbies here in the United States, and I personally have nothing against that. Each one is fighting for his own, what he considers to be his own right. That's fair. And as for the Moroccan attitude towards the Jews, that's one thing, but towards Israel, that's a different thing. For me, anyway. For the king, he might, he's the boss. He might decide whatever he wants. But for me, I just like the King Hassan II has said 2 years ago or 3 years ago, that all Israelis of Moroccan origin are welcome to come back to their country whenever they want to, and they do. And we even had members of the Israeli Knesset in Morocco. And the Jewish community in Morocco is doing well and thriving. And I have nothing personally against that. And I have nothing against the Israelis who are Moroccans. But I have a great deal against the state of Israel. Because I still consider that the state of Israel, has taken over land of people who had been there and who have been living in camps for over 30 years now. And this is something that I say quite clearly because that's my opinion. And I'm not qualified to judge the position of King Hassan II on this issue. But what I know is that for the general Moroccan population, there is a very important distinction that is always established between Judaism and the state of Israel. These are two things for most of us in Morocco. And I'm one of the people who differentiate between the state of Israel and the Jews, no matter whether they are in Morocco or elsewhere. Two different things. One is religious opinion and the other is political colonialism. Maxime Rodinson, who is a Jewish scholar, has written a book about Israel, a settler colonial state or something like that. So we're talking about two different things. And I'm not judging Egypt because I'm quite sure that Egypt is a very important country and it can take care of itself. I think it can. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I still don't understand what the prevailing view is. And King Hassan, you said, is the boss, and Morocco is considered a modern country.
It is.
In the Muslim world.
Sure.
And it seems to me that the example of Egypt would be a good example for Morocco to follow in pursuing the peace process, the Camp David process that was initiated by the United States with Egypt and Israel in the year 1979.
I'm sorry I didn't address that particular part of your question. Yes, Shimon Peres was in Morocco and he was welcome. And when he was in Morocco, not a single Moroccan raised his voice to say why he was there. But Shimon Peres was there for us, at least as far as I can tell, because King Hassan II wanted to break the deadlock. And he really wanted to know whether the Israeli power structure with its conflicting, divergent forces was able to really, actually go for peace. And he just found out that at that stage that it was not possible because he didn't get, yes answers to the questions he asked Shimon Peres. And you might say, yes, but the peace process is a long process, and probably the meeting is part of the peace process. I agree, but I will not speak for the Palestinians. I will not speak for them. They can do it. Thank you.
I have a two-part question for the gentleman from Kuwait. Those of us who attended the State Department briefing this afternoon, there was some question as to who the Kuwaitis approached first about reflagging their vessels, whether they came first to the United States and then to the Soviet Union. Could you clarify for us who they approached first? And
I could answer the first part. I think Walid will answer the second one because that's his specialty. What I know is from our foreign ministry, they approach the American first, 3 months at least before they approaching the Soviet. The answer that we got back that the United States want to get involved in the Gulf. And we didn't tell them that we're going to the Soviet. It's quietly when we went to the Soviet, then after the Americans get to know about it, they came suddenly. No, we changed our mind. We don't know. No, the second part, I think Walid will.
I guess I agree with my colleague that the Kuwaitis have approached the Americans first, and according to the Kuwaitis, they were turned down by the Americans. And unlike, contrary to what was written in the Weinberger report to the Congress, I guess what he wrote was that it's true that we were asked by the Kuwaitis, but because of bureaucratic routine, we were not able to answer directly and so on. The thing about it, the Americans became really interested after Soviet acceptance to reflag first. You see, the Kuwaitis asked for reflagging, and the Soviets said, "Well, we are willing to reflag 5 ships." When the American administration knew about it, they said, "No, we will reflag 11 ships." Why to reflag 5 ships by the Soviets? And then after an agreement with the American and Kuwaiti administrations, the Kuwaitis went ahead and rented 3 Soviet ships. Now, why did the Kuwaitis do that? You see, it really has to do with the foreign policy. It's a country that has traditionally followed a non-alignment policy, and being a country geographically located between Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, 3 countries that would like to have more influence in Kuwait, but because of this balancing and conflicting interests and contending interests of the 3, Kuwait has been able, until the Iranian Revolution, to play a balancing role between these 3 contending interests. That also helped the Kuwaitis to play a balancing role between the Soviets and the Americans. You know that the Kuwait, outside Iran and Iraq, was the first country first country among the other Gulf states to establish diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union. And so it was not difficult for the Kuwaitis to approach the Soviets, since such relations has existed formally since 1963.
I really have 2 questions. One is, you have stated that there are 3 Soviet ships now in Kuwait. Are you using them? Have there been any problems with them? What sort of support have the Soviets provided for these 3 ships?
It's a very interesting question, really. You see, what you have is 3 Soviet oil tankers rented by Kuwait, and of course they raise the Soviet flag, and they are usually escorted by 4 or 5 Soviet warships. But because of Soviet rapprochement with the Iranians, and especially after Security Council Resolution 598, the Iranians have decided not to hit on the Soviets, but to hit on Americans. And having a sizable, American fleet in the Gulf, and because of the U.S.-Kuwaiti agreement only includes the protection of such ships in the international waters. Now, what the Iranians are doing are hitting, U.S. or Kuwaiti reflagged ships in Kuwaiti territorial waters. And the Americans can always say that this lies outside the agreement between us and the Kuwaitis. And this is where the Kuwaitis are asking really the question, okay, well, we have this protection agreement, which they call escorting our ships. They don't like to say it's protection, really. But the Iranians have been doing it in an indirect way, and effectively so far.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'd just like to correct the answer. I'm the State Department guy who made the statement. I wasn't sure who made the question, whether they asked the Soviets or us first, but I made the point that it didn't matter. We never did turn down the Kuwaitis. We didn't do anything. We debated it. There were pros and there were cons about should we or should we not. Among the pros of doing it was that because of Iran-gate, it would add to our credibility if we came. If we gave them a positive response to the flag of ship. Among the cons were the possibility of us getting involved in ratcheting up the crisis in the Gulf. And this debate was going on within the U.S. government, so there were good reasons to exceed the request and there were good reasons not to. And we were very wary about how we should do it. When the Soviets said they would, not when they were asked, but when we learned that they would do it, in addition to all the other reasons, pro and con, then was added, if you don't do it, you will give the Soviets the exclusive protection power in the Gulf. Now that in itself was not the factor, but that factor was added to the other factors, which included freedom of navigation, which included acceding to the request and being responsive to the Kuwaiti government, which included hoping to overcome the credibility gap due to Iran. The downside was still there, and it's still, you can hear it right here tonight, about not doing it for all the reasons that are fairly obvious. The decision at that point then was made to go ahead and do it. So you could say that the Soviet positive response was the catalyst, but it was not a single factor, the single factor in the decision. And between the time that we were asked in December and the time that we agreed in March, we did not turn down the Kuwaitis, we just didn't act. We closed under advisement. I'm sorry, I just wanted
thank you.
Good
question. Under advisement.
Anybody in the panel, perhaps the man in front, I'm curious how the panel appreciates the U.S. commitment to freedom of navigation in the Gulf, when one of the biggest detriments to freedom of navigation in the Gulf, excluding the U.S. warships, appears to be the Iraqis. We are plainly tilted towards the Iraqis in our military posture. Now, I frankly don't understand that. I wonder how the Gulf states. I don't know. I'm asking the panel how the Gulf states understand the U.S. commitment to freedom of navigation in the Gulf when the Iraqis are equally, or perhaps more, a factor in the lack of freedom of navigation in the Gulf.
I mean, the Iraqi hitting of some ships in the Gulf. Oh. No, the mistake they declared, the one that killed 37 American, they declared we were sorry in the Gulf. Or even Iraq, the first one, the president of Iraq, he declared about sorrow through calling the president about it. But talking about how come the Gulf we allow, I mean, we look positively toward Iraqi hitting some ship in Gulf, and the Iranian we refuse it. What happened, the difference, the Iraq declared that they going to hit ship. They told everybody the ship in the Iranian side. They never hit a ship in the, only except this American one mistake, they hit in territorial, international water. What happened, Iran came into international water. That's the only difference, as I see it.
In your meetings in these few days, did any of you come up with any solution to the Iraq-Iran war?
It's a very good question.
Yes, we talked. No, we talked about alternatives to the Iraq-Iran war, and we talked about probable solution. I mean, not really decisive solutions to end the war. Some of the solutions were related to the United Nations resolution, for example, which is which came in 20th of July, last July. The proper following this resolution to its end, it will help a great deal in resolving the issues, I think. Also, I think a great deal will depend on the cooperation of the international system as a whole in this problem, particularly the European powers as well, beside the US and the Japanese, because they have a stake also in this area, and many other powers which have stakes in the area. They found now the war is getting out of hand now. When the war is out of hand now, then there is a restraining factor, which is should be introduced into the formula by all the major powers. I think the resolution of the United Nations represents one of the rare opportunities, really, for ending the war, because all 5 members, Security Councils, permanent members, maybe for the first time in the UN, they all agreed on a resolution which have different sets of principles and could be followed by the UN Secretary General. Now we have to give the UN Secretary General full powers to complete his mission and to bridge the gap between Security Council and the General Assembly, and to also mediate between the two parties and never stop his mission. Because I think once you have a stop or once you have a stallment of his mission, then you have a breakdown of this resolution, and this will be only tantamount for violence once again, and maybe a great violence actually will happen in the area, which is will affect many powers, not only the Arab states, the Gulf states, but many other powers in the region as well, and will disrupt navigation. And in this respect, I think the U.S. has a policy and a role to play, that is of supporting the United Nations and try to make a rapprochement with the USSR. Both of them have interest in this area. I wouldn't discount the USSR as well. If we discount it from a military point of view, we cannot discount it from economic or political viewpoint. The Soviet Union considered themselves as contingent to the many powers in the area, regional powers like Turkey, like Iran as well. And I think it's a healthy phenomenon that we should, bring all the main powers to have a decisive influence in the area in the ending the war, not in influencing to intervene in the area. It's a different matter. Interfering in the areas is different from ending the war, which has been now in the eighth year. It now costs not only material damage, as we hear about ships being hit here and there, but it is a human disaster for both countries and for many countries in the world as well. As you hear every time, there are people in the ships being killed, and people even in areas far away from the war killed because of missiles and sophisticated arms used by both countries. And the buildup of armament is really one of the questions which one would really put a ponder upon it a great deal, and think why in the hell should both countries really reach to such a level of armament, whether through direct shipments of armament or whether indirect shipments by black markets. And this is a question which should really be addressed by many people. Thank you.
Yes, I guess it is a good question, really. Well, we know that, and now the media knows that that Iran is now the stumbling block for a settlement there. Iraq has been willing to sit at the negotiations table and discuss matters with Iran. This is one point. The problem, it is for Iran. It's becoming like a zero-sum game, where one's meat is the other's poison. You see, and this is what is making things really more complicated. In addition to that, there has been, there were discussions going on between, 5 permanent members of the, Security Council since December, until, the adoption of 598, and what went on in that meeting between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, we really don't know, but it seems that there was something, mutual between them. It seems there was a mutual interest towards, having a kind of settlement, Maybe the reflagging issue has prompted, the adoption of 598. Now, what went on after 598 is what is puzzling. Not puzzling. It seems that developments in the area, the presence of, warships, etc., in the area, things started changing. And it seems to me that things started, going away from, really, this consensus, which many people call a rare consensus between the Soviet Union and the U.S. on the Gulf War. Now, the Soviets know that, that the Gulf, they know about the important and the strategic interests of the U.S. and Western, countries in the Gulf because of petroleum and so on. And so we don't know really whether the Soviets are playing this game in order to gain in other areas. There has been, the talks about the short and medium term, agreement about the missiles and the nuclear missiles, and also about the problem of Afghanistan. And between the big powers, there are always compensatory deals that are going on. Is there a deal? Are the Soviets trying to make a deal with the U.S. on another area of the world? Is it an opportunity for the Soviet Union to gain more influence in the Gulf? The Soviets have been trying for some time, to gain more influence in the Gulf, against, of course, the will of the United States. And so things, are not loose now. They are not as good as they were, during the adoption of 598. And this is what is, really making things more difficult.
I hear a lot about tilting and who's the enemy. What concerns me is something, a subject none of you have addressed. We have American hostages, and we seem to be addressing evils of the Soviet Union. America pushing your oil through the Gulf. All of you have intelligence agents, and it would seem to me, after all these years, one of these Arab countries couldn't deliver one single American. But we've been able to deliver 50, 75 of your oil ships up the Gulf. It doesn't seem very fair to me to spend our blood, money is significant, ships would be doing following any other areas. And all you can tell me is you've been mounting the Golan Heights, worrying about tilting one direction or another. How about tilting towards the American hostages and deliver something for us?
I'm really in deep sympathy to what you've mentioned, because I'm Lebanese and I'm suffering as you are suffering, and even I have friends of mine who were taken hostages as well. Even I was almost taken as a hostage myself. So I really understand what you are really, what your feelings are about this issue. But the problem of Lebanon, those hostages are in Lebanon now, right? And Lebanon is not dominated by Lebanese. And there are different militias in Lebanon. And it seems to me, and according to what we read, is that mostly pro-Iranian groups are, holding these, poor hostages. So it is really, it is true that it is an Arab country, but the hostages are not in, hands of people who are not pro-Iranian. Maybe they are Lebanese mercenaries, but they are not Lebanese. They are not people that you can cooperate with, because they are serving the interest of a country that is in opposition to the U.S. In other words, the presence of warships in the Gulf are not in favor of Iran or Iran's position on the war. In other words, maybe such things are complicating. The presence of ships maybe are complicating things and not otherwise.
Is Arab fundamentalism incompatible with peace in the Gulf?
Arab or Islamic?
Islamic fundamentalism incompatible with peace.
You would like to tackle that? Is Islamic fundamentalism incompatible with peace in the area?
Well, Islam is a religion, and as all of you here, the Muslims are human beings whose lives are not dominated solely by religious ideas. You have the economic side, the political, the social, in its most diluted form, and so on. And therefore, I think that one has to rephrase, the question, or rephrase the labeling of the problem. Islamic fundamentalism, I think, all the people in the Middle East are Muslims, whether they are fundamentalists or not. And therefore, peace, is not the the chasse gardée, the enclosed or preserved area for one religion or one belief system or whatever. Peace is something that all mankind, aspires to, but there are other needs, political, economic, and so on. Therefore, I would stop this here and I wouldn't comment on this, because Islam, has always called for peace. Islam is the religion of peace. But the Muslim world, as you know, in its long history, has had various problems to deal with. And Islam, militant Islam, if you like, is one of the ways to try to solve some of the problems that the Muslim world, is suffering from today. And fundamentalism as such is not something that only Islam is undergoing today. We even saw, a cover story in a French magazine about the Mullah of Iran, of Israel, talking about Jewish fundamentalism. And the same thing is true in other religions and other belief systems and so on. But religion is here to stay, and it is one part of the values and ideals and so on that a human being, any human being, has. So it doesn't control his life, completely. But maybe, there are one more
just
comment on this.
a small comment. I agree with my colleague. I mean, what he said about Islam. I don't like to put labeling on whether it is fundamentalist or otherwise. Muslims are Muslims. Islam is Islam. But the main thing is to understand is the religion is tolerance towards other religions or not. I mean, if Muslims, genuine Muslims practice Islam in its proper tenets, they will be tolerant towards other religions. That's what we are taught as Muslims. Whether we are tolerant towards Christianity, towards Judaism, the main religions, the main religions in the world. However, theory should be differentiated from practice. If there are some people who are narrow-minded, or some people who want to make divisions within the society, this happens not only in the Muslim world, but it happens also in many other worlds other than the Muslim world. So what I want to say is that practicing Islam in its proper way will really give the flavor of tolerance, not the otherwise. That's what I want to say. And even I think the Assistant Secretary of State, who was I think Robert, not McFarlane, Murphy. Yes, he stated that clearly that fundamentalism doesn't really contradict U.S. role in the area. Or doesn't really have an effect on U.S. role in the area, according to his perception about fundamentalism. Thank you.
Okay, I can see we're just getting warmed up here, but unfortunately I think we are running out of time for that.
And indeed, I must apologize for that. We do have a time limit, unfortunately, which we will abide by. And I'd like to thank Dr. Long also for participating. Dr. Long was diplomat in residence at Georgetown, formerly head of the Near Eastern Office of the Bureau of Intelligence and Research at the Department of State, the author of half a dozen books, a seasoned diplomat in the area. We thank you for clarifying that one question. And we thank all of our panel for what I think was indeed an insightful view of divergences of views among the Arabs toward American policy. Thank you very much.